and Learn podcast, hosted by Yuliya and Ina, friends, colleagues, passionate teachers and learners. In this series of cozy talks with a cup of tea or coffee, we talk about how we live and learn, move countries, adapt to change and mentalities, encourage and teach. While polishing our own understanding of learnability, we find support in the 4 pillars of Live and Learn philosophy, which include growth mindset, expat life, language acquisition, and skills development. Join us, enjoy, live and learn.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Doing pretty fine. Back in Germany.
Congratulations on coming back. Tell our listeners, where do you come from? What's the situation? What's the situation with the flights, with crossing the borders, with showing all those papers?
Yeah, the situation is changing so fast that by the time this episode is on air, it won't be relevant any longer, I think. We normally say, I'm afraid, but this time it's rather, I hope. It won't be relevant because we are so much used to traveling free, no borders, you just buy a ticket and show your passport, that's it. But this year it's not the case, and now traveling has become much more complicated. If you can travel, then there are many more papers you have to present at the border, the passport control, and I just hope it will change, but it won't change completely. It also seemed like checking all the stuff that we earlier were used to doing with preparation of the visa documents and something. Well, now it looked pretty much the same. You study the rules, the regulations, and then you never know which of the regulations apply now because it is constantly changing.
However, welcome back. So you're safe and sound back home after all the precautions, after all the requirements filled. You're back home. What did it take to come back?
On a bright side, it's that we always say it's time to repeat that one more time. Everywhere you go, you take with you is you. And that helps to feel at home wherever you are. Another thing still, as a downside, is that when you go somewhere, you never come back the same person who left. And it makes it complicated. There are so many things I've noticed during my stay back in Ukraine. I want to share, maybe not all of them, some of them that are relevant to our topics of Live and Learn philosophy. So let's see what comes out of it. One thing is certain, that coming back home is a feeling, and a feeling of being home or back home refers very much to what you feel, to how you are, where you find yourself at this point of your life. And I can say, okay, where is my home? Yeah, I can say my mom's home is my home. My home back in Italy is my home, and I want to come back and feel how it is after a long break. My home is in Germany is my home because there is also where I belong. It's quite hard to distinguish between the different feelings of being at home in different places.
When we're going somewhere and when we're trying to adapt to a new culture, so we have all the realm and spectrum of intercultural communication, intercultural skills, attitudes, and knowledge. However, there is a specific chapter, if you may, I don't know, that says about coming back home and coming back to where you spent a lot of time where you have all the connections or many connections, and you have the experiences, you recognize the places, you recognize the streets, and so on. So would you share how did you perceive coming back to where you spent most of your life, and how does it feel? Of course, there is a problem of coming back into the COVID times, but still, let's put these two things separately. So, first things first, second things second.
There is this concept of a reverse culture shock, which I completely could feel when I came back to Ukraine after a long period of not being there. And like you said, there are cultural codes that you recognize. There is a language that you speak that is your first language that you grew up with. And theoretically, there shouldn't be any problems because this is what you perfectly know. Yeah? You have to adapt to other countries and cultures. However, that's why we have this concept of a reverse culture shock, because we adapt to a new mentality in a new country where we live, then we come back home and we don't feel at home at first. We don't recognize those cultural codes, strangely enough. And okay, I'll continue saying I did not recognize cultural codes. I felt it hard to say to myself, but I know how things work here. I'm supposed to know how things work. And still, I didn't feel at ease. I had to decode those things anew. That was quite a weird feeling, because somewhere deep inside, you know that you know all these things. You know that you know the language. So theoretically, you should react quickly when people say something to you. I couldn't react quickly. Okay, yeah, in COVID times, it's harder when you wear a mask and a person, hopefully, is wearing a mask too and says something. I couldn't decipher what the person was saying, even in my mother tongue, because I couldn't see the articulation. And then I couldn't really understand very quickly. I couldn't get oriented fast whether the person was speaking Russian or Ukrainian. So I had to first establish the code and then start decoding, which makes it also quite complicated. Lots of things. Then a curious thing that I noticed in the very first days was that it's been so hard to concentrate, to focus on what people were telling, like at shops, anywhere in Germany, because I was trying to understand the language. It's not my native language, so I need to put effort in order to understand. And then back in Ukraine, well, it's my native language. And then I struggle to understand what they're talking about. And no, I don't understand, especially when people say stuff like, do you need a bag? Do you need a plastic bag? All that stuff that, well, I don't need. And I don't want to understand what you're saying. And I don't want to reply. Can I just have my shopping with me and be free? Yeah, so also this stuff that presupposes that I understand all the words, and still I don't easily decipher the context. I don't easily understand whether I really need to be paying attention.
How did it feel coming back to your hometown, home city, and having all the streets renamed? This is a weird situation. I think that this is something that I had the last time I were back in Dnipro. I came back and I couldn't find any address, because suddenly, after 5 years of me not being a Dnipro citizen, the names of the city was changed. The names of the major streets were all changed, and I found myself lost in my own home city. how was it this time? Did you have any kind of losing yourself somewhere in your native town?
No, I can't relate here because I didn't go out, so I didn't have to find the address or something. And then I'm anyway, how do you call that kind of feeling an idiot anywhere because I don't know directions. I can't locate myself, whatever the names of the streets are. So I always use a navigator anyway if I have to go somewhere. So no, that's not my problem. I basically feel myself an idiot when I have to go to a place. I formulate that ironically that way for myself because I don't care what the street names are. I anyway never know how to get to a place, so I have to use a navigator, and that's how I move around.
I see, I see. So you mentioned the concept of the cultural culture shock, and reversed culture shock. Do you want to talk a little bit more about it? When I normally teach intercultural competences, there are a lot of pictures that refer to adjusting, leaving, going to live in your home country, arrive into a new country, experiencing a culture shock of a new country, feeling a little bit frustrated, homesick. But then the process of adjusting and adaptation comes. What happens back when you're coming home? So which are the levels that maybe are there?
It's a different thing compared to that curve of adaptation, honeymoon, all that sort of things with the culture shock, because you are adapting anew. And as I mentioned in the beginning, when you go somewhere, you never come back the same. And so you never come back home the same. This is something that lies at the very fundamentals, the very base of this feeling of a reverse culture shock. You come back with an illusion of coming back to the same place, but really what happens is that you are changed. You don't come back to the same place being the same person. And there is a big gap between who left and who is coming back. It takes much effort to become aware of these things. And anyway, even before leaving, I had already recorded an episode about reverse culture shock for my Italian podcast. And I was talking there about the very basics of this thing, starting when we come back on holiday if we live abroad. And then come back on holiday, we expect to feel the excitement of coming back home, of seeing the same people, of eating the same food, of speaking the same language. Strangely enough, we come back, but it's not us in the former version of us who comes back. It's a new us that comes back to the same place, but nonetheless, it's not the same place. It's not the same people. People also live their lives and develop and change. You as well live in another country, adapt to a new country, culture, language, mentality, and everything that we very often discuss. So you've changed, other people have changed. The place, as you said, might change names of the streets. So it's an illusion of coming back to the same place, right? But hoping with the excitement of coming back home, hoping to find the same fails. And this is what I could personally feel. As well, if I may share some personal anxieties, I felt anxious when I could smell the same smells that belong to previous epochs even of my life. And these could be smells of some paint, of flowers, of grass. It's all different. And I haven't been back for so many years in the same season when I could smell those smells, yeah, that coming back evoked the anxieties that belonged to decades ago. And I'm not the same person to feel those anxieties anymore. Anyway, emotionally, subconsciously, these things arise, and it's not easy.
Yes, the very idea of the readapting, reestablishing to something that you are expecting to be this way, right? Belongs much more to the expectation management, as you mentioned. So, because we cannot expect the city not evolving by itself, and the city shouldn't, or I don't know, the people of the city, our families, our friends, I don't know, those people who we're meeting, who are still there, they should not expect us to be the same, right? So there is a fantastic excitement of coming home after, for example, the lockdown, when we didn't have such an opportunity. So yeah, this is awesome. This is fantastic thing that I'm going to see my parents. I'm going to hug my parents. I don't know, see some friends. But then comes the initial frustration. Like, wait, why do you want me to buy this plastic bag? Or why there is no specific designation what time the bus arrives? Why there is no bus schedule? So we have the frustrations that we are now fighting in ourselves inside, right? Of the best practices that we remember and the best practices that we are adapted to, right? So we always are seeking for the optimal place. What happens next after the culture shock that we have with all those things gathering together, right? So we have this being overwhelmed with those little frustrations that come around, depending how much time you spend, of course. You mentioned a couple of times the phrase that it's not easy for me to understand what they want from me. Oh, it's not that easy, right? So this is the stage of a relapse when you're, I do understand what you're saying, but I'm still not getting it, right? So there is this puzzlement, half a second, maybe nanoseconds, but we still feel that formulations in our heads.
And also it gave me personally that chance to relax a bit about having to take time to understand when people talk to me in German, because as well it takes time to understand in my native language, so I can relax. What a relief.
So you need the time to control shift your keyboard in your head. Installing the keyboard in our head and, having the home again feeling.
And also to just have this idea not to be so stressed anymore about the time that it takes to understand something, to process, to respond, because if it works like that with my native language, nothing's bad if I need this time in a foreign language. Yeah? So it's really a relief that now I find helpful. That's a reverse culture, what? I don't know how to call it, but it's
double reverse
control shift. And so this is also such an experience that you can take back with you and use it to deal with the challenges of everyday life in a foreign country, in a country that you are still adapting to. A very good lesson.
Yeah, so this adaptation to the life in the home country, you're seeing that I don't know, your parents are growing older, your place where you lived is getting smaller, or getting, I don't know, whoever has what kind of expectations or things. But you're readjusting, so you're trying to calibrate your expectations, what you're seeing, what you're expecting, to feel the reality, right? To adapt to this new home country. And then you have this, oh, finally, I recalibrated my scope, I recalibrated my expectations, and I'm happy to come back and to work here, I don't know, integrate into the learning after feeling readjusted. However, my question to you, this is not the first time you're coming back home. This is not the first time. Do you feel that the more you practice, the more you've experienced this double, triple, quadruple culture shocks, do you think that it's easier to get your expectation managed? After you came back from Italy for the first time, the second time, after you came after the first time in Germany, I don't know. You already know that it won't be the same. You already know what awaits for you, that the expectations are different from what we're experiencing.
I somehow feel that it's a bit like managing loss or living through or surviving grief or something, that you can have this situation so many times as it happens in life, and you know there are these stages, but you will anyway go through these stages again because this is how it works. I think maybe it could take less time. I don't know. I can't really say because this time has been hard for me. And I can't really assess if previous times were easier or harder, and I don't remember that. I don't know. I can't assess really. But how it works for me now, I feel like going through this feeling of loss with all the stages that there are. And even if I go through these stages many times, they are still there. You can't skip one stage because it should be, it is natural. That's my feeling. What probably helped me this time was maybe the second day after I arrived, coming back to my routines. And this, I can admit, is the thing that was really helpful. Jogging again every morning. And then, yeah, I continued my lessons. So my routines changed very little. And still the emotional background corresponded very much to all the stages of going through this reverse culture shock. If it was a skill, if I get you right, what we get better in with time, with practice, is a skill, yeah? But at the same time, I feel there are things that we don't practice as a skill, or in this case, I can't say yet. I don't know, maybe I need time to process again. But by now, I can't say it's a skill that I've somehow mastered. I'm just more aware that there can be those reactions, which did not cancel going through them.
More or less, you're now back to Germany. So do you feel that you're going to be having the triple reverse culture shock?
Well, I hope to, because I want to go to Italy for the summer. I hope to have more culture shocks of various nature and feel what comes out of it. After this reverse culture shock, I can say I am ready to be vulnerable. I'm ready to face the challenges of going back or coming back to places that I love. And I am ready to see that people there have changed. I am ready to be exposed and find grounds in the routines that I know well. Do you remember we discussed these things in the episode about expat life and how to adapt to a new country? We also mentioned sticking to routines as to something that grounds us, as something that gives us support. So I think it very much is connected to any change that we are ready to have, or are not ready to have.
Yeah, and we also mentioned trying to put around the things that you feel familiar, that you feel you get used to, such little things as we mentioned shampoo or your favorite little things. So I recall the situation, but that's specifically the opportunity to control and to manage the situation, even though it is going to happen. So whenever you're coming back or coming to a new country, so one of the best advice would be just to make yourself comfortable and do not put yourself at unnecessary exposure. So to have some time to reflect, to have some time to do your routines, to have some time to have quality time. So instead of, being super angry because of the bus is not coming or coming late, or where is this street or where is that, or why people are getting late here or anything else. So just to have the idea of the concept in the head and let yourself the time with the other people, the time to reestablish, return and protect yourself from this psychological distress, because you are readjusting to the culture and the values of your home country, right? Trying to have this dialogue, to getting attached to the place after you've been detached from it.
Sounds like it's possible.
Even though it is unavoidable. Okay, so please revisit our episode on on moving countries and on expat life and on intercultural communication list. We have 11, I think, episodes together in one block. We've mentioned already several tips, but it's up to you to hear yourself, to listen to yourself, to listen what you're saying, what you're speaking, how you're representing yourself, and how you live and how you learn.
Live and learn.
Live and learn.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you share Live and Learn philosophy, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all the major social media, comment, and spread the word about this podcast so that more people could get their weekly portion of growth mindset content. Live and learn.